What's going on, guys, and welcome back to another FPL video on the channel. And in today's one, we are going to be looking at the top 5 FPL forwards to buy for game week 1. Make sure you guys do smash a like on the video, but let's just get straight into it, man. And I really do want to start off by talking about one of my favorite, if not my favorite option for game week 1, and that is the man himself, Dominic Solanke. I'm going to put my neck on the line. I'm going to start off by saying I genuinely believe he is the number 1, the best forward option that you guys can start the FPL season with. For me, he is a must-have. He is absolutely essential. There you go. I said it, right? I'm putting my neck on the line, but you know what? I genuinely do believe that. And of course, guys, I am no FPL expert, so don't shoot the messenger. But this is just my opinion, man. I really do think Dominic Solanke is going to be an absolutely sensational pick to start the FPL season with. And I want to start off by talking about the fixtures that Tottenham have, because it is a massive reason, not the only reason, but a massive reason why I do really like Dominic Solanke. Of course, in game week 1, he's got a home fixture against Burnley, and then in game week 2, a little bit more of a difficult fixture against City away. But we've seen Tottenham in recent years do really well against Manchester City. Even last season, when they were so poor under Ange Postecoglou, they still managed to absolutely destroy Man City 4-0, right? So yeah, in recent years, the proof is in the pudding. Spurs are pretty much like a bogey team for Manchester City, so I wouldn't be surprised if Solanke can provide some attacking returns in that fixture. But in game week 3, it's a game against Bournemouth at home. In game week 4, it's West Ham away. Even after that as well, the fixtures are really good. You've got Brighton away in game week 5, Wolves at home in game week 6, Leeds away in game week 7. Man, look, I could go on and on, guys, but you guys can see here the fixtures are absolutely amazing for Dominic Solanke. So that's reason number 1 as to why I genuinely believe he is a must-have pick. But not only that, guys, as we know, Ange Postecoglou has been sacked. Tottenham have appointed Thomas Frank as their manager. And let me tell you something about Thomas Frank in the Premier League. He seems to get the best out of number 9s. All number 9s that have played under Thomas Frank in the Premier League have seemed to perform well. When you look at Brentford, when you look at players like Yohan Wissa last season getting 19 goals, when you look at Brian Mbeumo, when you look at Ivan Toney right before he got suspended, he was absolutely cooking, scoring goals for fun. So the proof is in the pudding there as well, right? Number 9s under Thomas Frank, from what I've seen, have really performed well in the Premier League, and that does fill me with confidence in Dominic Solanke, right, being a good pick. And look, I do want to say something, right? Because Wissa last season, for example, he managed to get like I think 19 Premier League goals, and I wouldn't sit here and say that Wissa is this elite or world-class number 9, right? He's not even an elite finisher. For example, Wissa does miss a lot of chances, but still in that Thomas Frank system, right, he was able to get a lot of goals. And yes, some credit has to be given to Yohan Wissa. I don't think he's an elite player. I don't think he's an elite finisher, but I do think his sort of movement in the box is very good, and Wissa does pick up good spaces in and around the box to put himself in the best position to get those goals. But Solanke also himself isn't really an elite finisher. But as I've just said, we've seen someone like Yohan Wissa, who isn't an elite finisher, be able to score so many goals. And I do think Solanke, right, can also do that himself. I mean, we've seen him score, I think, 19 Premier League goals for Bournemouth. So I do think he can sort of replicate that form that we saw a couple seasons ago for Bournemouth in this new Thomas Frank system at Spurs, right? So for me, there is a lot. Like, I just think there's so much potential here with Dominic Solanke, especially because, of course, Thomas Frank will now be managing Tottenham Hotspur. So yeah, for me, guys, at 7.5 million, I absolutely love Dominic Solanke. I really do. And I think Solanke as well, one thing I do want to point out is I don't really expect Heung-min Sonaldo, right, to be a massive part of Spurs' plans this season, and I don't really think he'll be a consistent starter. So what that does potentially mean for Dominic Solanke is that he also might have penalties, and if he does have penalties as well, oh my word, he is going to be even more essential. That is my honest opinion, guys. Honestly, I really do like him as a pick. So yeah, you guys saw my first FPL draft. He was in there, and I can tell you guys this from now. If he stays fit in preseason, he will be in my Game Week 1 squad no matter what. I will be there no matter what. So yeah, simple as that, man. But yeah, I'd love to know your thoughts down below in the comments. What do you guys think of Dominic Solanke as an FPL pick? So next up, we do have Ollie Watkins, guys, and I'm going to be honest, he is my second favourite pick to start the FPL season with after Dominic Solanke. And to be honest with you, I really do think Ollie Watkins and Dominic Solanke are absolutely essential. I think they are the best two forward options that you guys can start the season with, in my opinion. And of course, I could end up being wrong, but I'm not going to sit on the fence, guys. I'm just going to say what I truly believe. And Ollie Watkins, for me, is another player that I'm definitely going to be starting the season with as well, as long as he can stay fit in pre-season. Because for me, Ollie Watkins, we know what he can do. He's Premier League proven. He's been there. He's done it. And look, last season, he managed to get 16 goals and 8 assists. And that was at a time where he was being rotated more than usual with the likes of John Duran and Marcus Rashford when he joined in January. So yeah, for me, I think, look, the potential is certainly there with Ollie Watkins. Also, the long-term fixtures, right, for Aston Villa, absolutely ridiculous. Really, really good. In game week 1 is probably their toughest fixture, and that is actually against Newcastle at home, right? But thankfully it is at home, so it's not too bad. After that is Brentford away in game week 2, then Palace at home in game week 3, and then Everton away in game week 4. Now after that, right, the fixtures continue to be really, really good, because they do have Sunderland in game week 5, Fulham in game week 6, Burnley in game week 7. Absolutely ridiculous. So you guys can see here, the first 7 game weeks are really, really good for Ollie Watkins. But I also do want to say this, right? From game weeks 8 to 11, you'd probably argue that this is a tough fixture run for Aston Villa, right? Playing against Spurs away, City at home, and Liverpool away. However, we know what type of player Ollie Watkins is. He is a player that thrives on the transition, in the transition, right? We know that he is good playing against these teams that are most likely going to play high lines against Aston Villa, the likes of Spurs, the likes of Manchester City and Liverpool, right? So I wouldn't even be surprised, right, if Ollie Watkins can get some attacking returns in these more difficult games like Spurs and City and Liverpool. So, and I mean, when you even look at the fixtures after that, it's then Bournemouth, Leeds, Wolves and Brighton. So I think Ollie Watkins is genuinely just a long-term set and forget striker pick, in my opinion, because I feel like Ollie Watkins, you know, he's a decent big game player. He does, you know, we've seen him score against Liverpool multiple times. We've seen him score against Man City multiple times. We've seen him score against Arsenal. So I wouldn't even mind owning Ollie Watkins through the tougher games. And as I said, the type of player that he is, you know, in these tougher games where Villa might be, you know, playing a bit more defensive than usual and hitting teams on the break, Ollie Watkins does thrive in that sort of game style. So yeah, for me, I just think Ollie Watkins, man, another player that I absolutely love to start the season, man. The fixtures there are really, really good. So for me, no matter what your sort of chip strategy is, whether you're planning on an early wild card or a late wild card or an early bench boost or an early free hit, I just feel like Ollie Watkins has to be in the squad. And another reason why I do like Ollie Watkins, the last point I do want to make, is game week 2. Right, game week 2 for captaincy is very, very tough. If you guys look at the fixtures here, right, you guys can see game week 2 is pretty tough for captaincy. You've got Salah playing away to Newcastle, Haaland at home to Spurs. Palmer is the early kickoff away to West Ham. Is not ideal, you know, it being the early kickoff. We all know that unwritten FPL rule, never back the early kickoff. So well, I look at game week 2 and I think, okay, realistically, Saka is probably the best captain option. But also, if you don't have, I mean, even if you have Salah, right, and you sort of don't feel comfortable captaining Salah, but you don't have Saka because you don't like the fixtures Arsenal have in other game weeks, I think going for Ollie Watkins captain away to Brentford wouldn't be a bad shout at all, honestly, because I think Brentford are going to struggle a lot this season, in my opinion. They've lost the likes of, you know, Brian Mbeumo, Norgard, they've lost their manager as well, so I do expect a massive drop-off with Brentford, and for that reason, I think game week 2, Ollie Watkins as a captain option could be pretty decent. So it's another reason why I really do like Ollie Watkins as a pick. So yeah, man, I do expect Ollie Watkins to you know, stay at Aston Villa as well. I don't expect him to move away. So yeah, for me, Ollie Watkins, absolutely love him. I'd have to put him at number 2 for the top 5 forwards to start the FPL season with. All right, guys, so next up, we do have the robot himself, Erling Haaland. And I do want to start off by saying, I know he did underperform last season. I think we could all agree Erling Haaland underperformed massively last season, which is pretty crazy to say because he still did manage to get 22 Premier League goals. But that just shows you the levels and the standards that Erling Haaland has set for himself. But I will say this, right? Whether or not Erling Haaland did sort of underperform last season, I think we all know, right, deep down, that Erling Haaland is a bona fide world-class elite number 9 who guarantees goals. It's as simple as that. So, in my opinion, in an off season, if Erling Haaland can score 22 goals, imagine if he plays 30%, 40% better than what we saw last season, right? We're looking at a maybe 30 goal season or a 28, 29 goal season from Erling Haaland. So I do think, right, we shouldn't just dismiss Erling Haaland straight away because of the poor season he had last season, right? I still think Erling Haaland is a fantastic elite FPL asset. Now, in terms of the fixtures, right, I do think the fixtures are a bit hit and miss with Erling Haaland to start the season for like the first 5 game weeks, right? Because look, Wolves away is good. I like it a lot in game week 1. Tottenham at home could prove to be tricky in game week 2. Then Brighton away in game week 3. Again, it's an okay fixture. Man United in game week 4. You never know what can happen in the Manchester derby. And then in game week 5 is Arsenal away. So I would say the fixtures to start the season for Erling Haaland is a bit hit and miss. But I still think, again, I think chip strategy does also play a huge role in whether you decide to start the season with Erling Haaland, and I guess who the other players that you've picked in your team. But look, even with those fixtures, right, I mean, from game week 6 onwards, the fixtures are really good, right? Simple as that. The fixtures from game week 6 onwards are absolutely sensational, right? Really good. Burnley at home in game week 6, Brentford away in game week 7, Everton at home in game week 8, Villa, Bournemouth. Like, the fixtures from game week 6, really good. So yeah, the question is, do you start the season off with Erling Haaland from game week 1 to 5? Now, that is something I have been considering. He was actually in my first draft, right? And that's because I didn't have Mohamed Salah. But look, I think whether or not you go for Haaland, as I said, definitely does depend on maybe your chip strategy, in my opinion. And I do quickly want to touch on Erling Haaland versus Mohamed Salah, because I do think if you go for Erling Haaland, it probably means you're not going to go for Salah. I think it's looking quite difficult to build a good overall team with both Haaland and Salah in there, especially if you want to pick the likes of Cole Palmer, who has really good fixtures. So yeah, something I quickly want to touch on is Haaland versus Salah. And the more and more I've been thinking about this, in terms of who do you start the season with, the more and more I've come to the conclusion of it just depends on what your chip strategy is. Because I'll tell you guys this, right? If you decide to, for example, free hit in game week 3, right? I do think starting off with Salah over Haaland could actually be better. And that's because you'd have Salah for game week 1 at home to Bournemouth and game week 2 against Newcastle away. And you wouldn't have Haaland for Wolves away and Tottenham at home. That's not too bad. You then free hit in game week 3. You potentially have Haaland in that free hit team. And then in game week 4, you go back to your team with Mohamed Salah, who does have really good fixtures in game week 4, 5 and 6 against Burnley, Everton and Crystal Palace. So if I decide, okay, I'm going to free hit in game week 3, then I actually do believe going for Salah and potentially ignoring Haaland is the play. Right. However, you could also maybe do an early wildcard, for example. You could ignore Salah for the first 3 and go for Haaland, right, in game weeks 1, 2 and 3, and then wildcard out of Haaland into Salah. But then do you really want to wildcard out of Haaland into Salah when Haaland's got good fixtures from game week 6 onwards? It's a bit, I don't know, it's tough. It's tough, but ultimately what I would say is that you've got to pick your poison, right? I think a lot of people are favouring Salah. I also do like Haaland, right? And at the moment, I've actually, if you watch my last video, you guys would have seen that I didn't go for Salah and I've gone for Haaland instead, but that certainly could change. As I said, for me, I think once I decide what my chip strategy will be to start the season, that will give me a good indication of who I prefer over Haaland, who I prefer out of Haaland and Salah. But yeah, it is very tough. And look, of course, Salah last season was much better than Erling Haaland. But let's not act like Haaland is a bum. Let's not act like Haaland is a scrub. This season, Haaland is more than capable of outscoring Salah, right? Because Haaland is Haaland. As I said, he's a bona fide elite world-class number 9 who guaranteed goals. It's simple as that, bro. Simple as that. So yeah, for me, it is very tough because I think both Liverpool and Man City have a bit of like awkward fixtures to start the season. I'd say the first 3 fixtures, Haaland is better. But then after that, I think Salah's fixtures from game week 3 to 6 is better. But then after that, from game week 6 onwards, I think Haaland is better. So it is very difficult. And I'm not sure what the best way, how do you go about navigating each game week to try and get the best out of both worlds, I guess. How do you navigate it so you can get Haaland through his good periods and Salah through his good periods? It is quite tough. But as I said, I think it does depend on your chip strategy. I think potentially maybe even just starting with Salah, right, for the first 5 game weeks, then wildcarding in game week 6 into Haaland might be the play. But yeah, man, it is definitely tough to say who is better between Erling Haaland and Mohamed Salah. All I would say, I guess you could argue I'm kind of sitting on the fence here, which I don't really like to do. I don't usually do that, but the more and more I think about it, the more and more I just think it genuinely just does depend on what your chip strategy is. But look, overall, as I said, I would rank Haaland number 3 for the top 5 FPL forward to start the season with. I do think Ollie Watkins and Dominic Solanke are better options than Haaland, especially when you do factor in the price as well. So yeah, let me know your thoughts down below on that, but let's just move on to the next player. So next up, guys, we do have Alexander Isak, and he is coming in at a price of 10.5 million. I have decided to rank him in the number 4 position out of the top 5 forwards. And look, I do think Alexander Isak is a very, very good option to start the Premier League season with. Of course, the first 2 fixtures aren't necessarily ideal, right? Newcastle are playing against Aston Villa away from home and then Liverpool at home. But after that, the fixtures do get a lot better for the long term, right? Because then from game week 3 onwards, this Leeds away, Wolves at home in game week 4. In game week 5, it's a fixture against Bournemouth away. In game week 6, Arsenal at home. But then in game week 7, it's Forest at home, Brighton away in game week 8, Fulham at home in game week 9. You guys can see here, right? The long stretch of fixtures are really, really good from game week 3 onwards. So I actually do like Alexander Isak a lot. I think he's a fantastic option. And of course, man, we all know how much of a quality player this man is, right? Alexander Isak last season had a great Premier League campaign, getting 23 goals, 6 assists, and he was a fantastic FPL asset. He was bagging goals for fun, and I just think, you know, as the years go by, Alexander Isak will progress and get better and better and better. So for me, I think this season, I would predict Alexander Isak to have another fantastic goal scoring season. And for that reason, I just think, you know, starting off with Alexander Isak isn't a bad shout at all. I think 10.5 million, even though he's had a price increase, is still a fair price for Alexander Isak, because as I said, I do expect him to score a lot of goals. I think Newcastle have also, you know, made a couple of signings. They've signed Anthony Elanga, so they've got strength and depth there, added a bit of quality to the team. So look, I expect Newcastle to start the Premier League season strong, especially looking at those fixtures, and I just expect Isak to do the business, man. It's simple as that. And I would say, right, it does look like he's pretty much, you know, a template pick at the moment, because 39.2% ownership is actually relatively high, and he wasn't in my first draft, which is interesting. But I can understand why people are going for Alexander Isak, man. I think he is a good pick. There is an argument to be made. You know, there is an argument to be made. He could even be, some of you might rank him higher than Erling Haaland, which would be fair enough. But yeah, I think Alexander Isak, man, just a really good, fantastic option for me, man. Not much really has to be said about Alexander Isak, man. I think we all know what he can do. So yeah, man, I think Alexander Isak, definitely a player that a lot of you guys should definitely be considering for your game week 1 squads. All right, guys, so for the last player, we do have Chris Woodinho, the man that absolutely terrorized me week in, week out last season in FPL. I made a huge mistake by not really picking this man throughout the entire season last year. I think only towards the very, very end I picked Chris Wood. But yeah, man, he absolutely just, yeah, he terrorized me last season. Now, look, I actually did kind of struggle on picking this 5th player, because I feel like with a lot of the other options, right, there is also some negatives, like quite a few negatives that I could find with them. And for me, the couple of negatives I found with Chris Wood is the fact that Nottingham Forest have bought a new striker, Igor Jesus, and also the fact that they're playing in Europe. So with those two partnered up together, it does make me slightly worried with Chris Wood. You know, will he play every game? Will he get the 90 minutes every game like he was last season? I'm not too sure. Will he even be the starting number 9? You know, have Nottingham Forest bought this Igor Jesus player to come in and be the starting number 9 for Nottingham Forest? I'm not too sure. Of course, as we progress in pre-season, we'll get a better understanding of what the plan is with Nottingham Forest and their team. But also another negative with Chris Wood and Nottingham Forest is the fact that they've sold Anthony Elanga, who was a key player for them last season, and they also, well, it's not being confirmed yet because of some legalities, but Morgan Gibbs-White, for example, is on his way out, it does look like. So Nottingham Forest are losing 2 big key players, right, for their attack, and I think that could affect Chris Wood. Of course, there is still, you know, a lot of days left of the transfer window, so Nottingham Forest could definitely buy some players, but there is sort of, I guess, a lot of reasons to be doubtful on Chris Wood being a good pick. However, the reason why I still have decided to go for Chris Wood in the number 5 spot for the top 5 forwards is because the fixtures are just so good. And because of what he did last season. I was looking at the other options. You know, you got players like Danny Welbeck, Ivan Nilsson, João Pedro. But I also don't like those plays because there's the risk of rotation there. And, you know, with like Brighton and Bournemouth, the fixtures are a bit hit and miss. João Pedro would be good if he was a guaranteed starter. But because of Delap and Jackson, I just can't guarantee that, right? I can't guarantee that. So for me, I would avoid João Pedro. And that's why I've gone for, I mean, even Wissa, for example, another, you know, mention there. But again, I've got my doubts on Brentford. They've lost so many players. So, yeah, I just feel like it was very hard to pick this last forward spot. But I've gone for Chris Wood, as I said, because of the fixtures. I think the fixtures are really, really good for Nottingham Forest. Like, really, really good. I think they've got some of the first 6 games for Nottingham Forest, absolutely sensational, bro. Absolutely sensational. They got Brentford at home, then Crystal Palace away in game week 2, West Ham at home in game week 3, a tough fixture against Arsenal in game week 4, but then in game week 5, they've got back-to-back games against newly promoted sides, Burnley away and Sunderland at home. So I just think those first 6 games are just so good. And if Chris Wood does end up being the starting number 9 for that Nottingham Forest team, then I would expect him to get a decent amount of FPL points, because yes, I would say that last season, right, there is an argument to be made that he sort of massively overperformed, right? He was very, very clinical, and, you know, if you were to sort of make predictions for the future, it wouldn't be sustainable. However, I will say that Chris Wood is a relatively Premier League proven striker. You know, he usually does get 10 plus goals in the Premier League, even when he was at teams like Burnley, for example. So if Chris Wood is the starting number 9 in the first 6 game weeks, I would expect Chris Wood to at least get, I'd say at least 4 goals, man. With those fixtures, I'd say at least 4 to 5 goals in the first 6 Premier League games potentially, man. But of course, a lot of it does rely on who Nottingham Forest sign, because they have to reinvest. They've lost 2 key players. So yeah, they have to reinvest. But at the moment, I would say Chris Wood could definitely be a really, really good option. Obviously, as I said, bro, with preseason, we have to wait and see if he does look like he'll be the main number 9 again this season. But I think there definitely is potential there. At 7.5 million, I think he could be a good pick, man. But of course, as I said, I already gave some honourable mentions to the likes of, you know, João Pedro, Welbeck, Ivan Nilsson. These are sort of cheaper players who didn't make it in the top 5. But yeah, man, that's what I've gone for my list. I would definitely love to know, guys, do you agree with my ranking, right? Solanke number 1, Watkins number 2, Haaland number 3, Isak number 4, and Chris Wood number 5. Have I made a mistake? I would love to know your thoughts down below in the comments. And of course, I am no expert. It's just my opinion. So yeah, let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. But thank you so much for watching this video, guys. Smash a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. It's been your boy FPL Ryan, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. But until then, I'm out. Peace.